Awesome. So I am excited to have you guys join us today for our training, How to Grow Your Church Beyond 200 Without Burnout or Compromise. And our goal for today ultimately is by the end of the webinar, I want to have you, I'm going to share with you five clear steps or five-step system to help you grow your church from under 100 to over 200 members without burning out. And I had someone kind of make this comment as if 200 was the ultimate goal. And really it's a numerical number, but every number represents a soul, right? Every number represents a person. So whether it's 250, 1,000, ultimately the desire is for us to be able to see more people come to know Jesus, right? That's the ultimate goal, and for people to be made into disciples. So whether it's 50, whether it's 10, whether it's 20, or whether it's 500 or 5,000, ultimately our heart's desire is to be able to reach as many people with the gospel as possible. Give me 1 second. For some reason, my slides just, there we go. And so real quick, I'm gonna just, in the comments, you should be able to see that there's a chat section on your screen. And so in the chat, I'm gonna just ask a couple of quick questions. And so in the chat, just kind of let me know if it's true or false. And so these questions are just gonna kind of give us an idea of how far along we are in regards to growing the ministry. So true or false, you need a clear strategy for fulfilling your God-given vision, right? So true or false, you need a clear strategy for fulfilling your God-given vision. You can go ahead and just kind of write it in the chat. And so the answer is actually true, right? So it's not enough to have a vision. Many times when I talk with pastors about their vision, what they communicate to me is their vision is something that they either borrowed from another church or something that they kind of, put two or three different vision statements together and kind of just meld it together. And so the goal isn't just to have a vision statement. We need to, number one, make sure that our vision statement is God's plan and God's purpose for our church. But then number two, if you've ever been in the mall and you see the sign that says you are here, right? And then you're able to now get to navigate to whatever store you're looking for. That's what your strategy should look like. It's how do we go from where we currently are as a church to where we believe God wants us to be? What are the changes? What are the adjustments? What do we need to do to go from where we currently are to where we believe God wants us to be? Second question, again, as we kind of go through this quick pop quiz, just in the chat, you can just type true or false. So true or false, most churches grow because of preaching, right? So most churches grow because of preaching. If you believe that's true, type true. If you believe it's false, you can put false in the chat. And so it's actually false. So so preaching is important. But growth doesn't just come from just attracting new people, right? You need a process to connect them and to grow them to the ministry. And so when we talk about growth, and I'm going to just mute you, Pastor Mike. And so when we talk about growth, it's how do we reach people, but then how do we keep the people we've reached? And then how do we disciple the people we've connected? Okay, so as we're growing, as we're helping people grow, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to attract people. We want to then connect the people we've attracted, and then we want to be able to disciple and help mature the people that we've connected. So when it comes to the growth process, it's not just preaching. Preaching is important, but it's preaching, but also having systems to help people connect on the back end. Okay, next question. True or false? Systems kill the spirit. Man, I hear this so many times. Systems kill the spirit. You think it's true or it's false? Just kind of put it in the chat. And the answer is actually false. Are there systems that can kill the move of God in your church? Absolutely. That if, that is if, though, that is if your church prioritizes systems over God's purpose and plans for your ministry. So, God honoring systems lead to growth. And so, the key is systems that serve our God given vision and not a vision that is a slave to our systems. Okay, so I want to make sure that that's clear in our minds. So, God honoring systems lead to growth. But if we're not careful, what we end up doing is we end up making our systems the most important thing versus the purpose and the plan. Like, what is it that God wants to accomplish? So, systems should help us accomplish the vision. Okay, two more questions. Numerical goals are bad, true or false? And just in the chat, right? In the chat, just kind of type true or false. So Pastor Travis, Pastor Mike, Pastor Eden's in the chat. Just kind of let me know true or false. Are numerical goals bad? And I see Pastor Dorfel put false, Pastor Eden's false. And the answer is false, right? Every number represents a soul. And so the book of Acts is full of examples of numerical counts of new believers, right? We see 500, 5,000 get saved here, 2,000. In fact, one of my favorite verses, Acts 6, 7, it says, and the believers or the disciples grew rapidly. And so every number represents a soul. Okay, last question, last question. Church growth, true or false, church growth is dependent on the leader. True or false? This is a little hard one, right? You got to think about this one. True or false? Church growth is dependent on the leader. True and false. But the team, yep. Pastor Mike put yes. Pastor Edens put true. Uh, Pastor Rodolfo put, but the team is needed. The answer is true, right? And here's why. The growth of the church is connected to the growth of the leader because how you lead your ministry, whether you allow teams to support you, whether you invest in people, um, you know, how you lead your ministry will help or impede the growth of the ministry. And so, as a pastor, you will become the cap to the growth of the church, or you will become a catalyst to the growth of the church. And so let me just go over real quick. Hey, I want you to know you're in the right place. If you've ever thought, man, I don't have time, we don't have volunteers, our budget is too small, we've tried everything. I want you to know you're in the right place because at the end, by the end of this masterclass, I'll show you why none of these things can stop a healthy church. If your church is healthy, you know, I will send at the end of the training, I'll make sure that I send a replay of today's of the actual session. But if your church is healthy, if your church is healthy, nothing is going to be able to stop you from growing, right? You're going to have the right systems, and even if you're heading in the wrong direction, you will be able to make the right adjustments. Let me just real quickly introduce myself. My name is Pastor Ariel. I help small church pastors build healthy, growing ministries without burning out. Over the last 10 years, I've helped churches of 50, 100, break 200 and beyond, and not by adding more stress, but right by having the right structure, having the right systems, really aligning themselves with the purposes and the plans that God has for the church. I'm a former discipleship pastor from a church in New York City. And I remember a couple of years ago, um, about 15, I was asked to launch a small groups ministry from scratch. And it was in that season that I experienced so much overwhelm. We had about 10, 15 people who said they would open up a group. And so every single person that had a question, I went through me. We had about 50 people that wanted to join these small groups. Again, I was calling everyone, and I found myself in this place where I was so overwhelmed because everything was relying on me. And in that season, I learned some principles that I'm going to share with you in a couple of minutes. These are the same principles that I've shared with some pastors. And so, real quickly, this was Pastor David from the Philippines. His church went from 30 to over 85 in less than a year. This is Pastor Chris Morante. His church was voted number 53 fastest growing church in America in 2020 by Outreach Magazine. This is Pastor Ryan. He went from 60 to 130 in about 6 months. Pastor Troy went from 175 to over 300 in about 8 months. Pastor Joe went from about 200 to about 400 in a year. Pastor Jordan, I was able to work with them in Saints Church, helping them add a discipleship process and connection process. And now on a regular basis, they're adding about 50 new members every quarter when they run the process. And so, real quick, housekeeping. Today's workshop is going to be practical. So, I'm going to share some very practical things. It's not inspirational. Maybe I'll have some moments where hopefully I inspire you, but my hope is that you are already inspired because you have signed up to be in the ministry, to serve, and to see God do amazing things. I'm going to show you a proven 5-step process that you can use right away, right? No, even if you don't have a big team or big budgets, and at the end, I'm going to share with you how, if you want, we can work together. This isn't for everyone, but I'm just going to let you know even from ahead of time. Because typically, I don't know if this happens to you, but whenever I jump onto any kind of training like this, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, they're going to want to sell me on something. And the truth is, I am going to invite you into a program. It's called Break 200 6-Week Accelerator. Just so you know ahead of time already, it's 149 or 12 payments of $27. Boom. That way, you're not spending the rest of the day thinking, well, what is he gonna offer? What is he gonna offer? And I want you to really focus and spend the next 45, 50 minutes really focusing on, is what he's sharing something that we can do? Is what he's sharing something that we can implement and put into practice? Will it be something that can impact our ministry? Okay. Um, right now, our major focus is really to equip you. And again, one of the things I just want you to keep in mind, some of the things that I might share with you might challenge the way you think about, church growth and the experience, but I want you to just stay open because I believe that God wants to grow your church, and sometimes growth comes from making adjustments to the way we think. And by the way, if you stay to the very end, I'm going to share this doc. It's what I call a resource doc. It's got a couple of things that I've put together that we use to support some of the churches that we work with. And so I'm going to give you, these different resources. It's all in one document. I will send it to you at the very end. So at the end, before we jump off, I'll put it in the chat. Okay. Why in the world does breaking 200 matter? Right? The reason it matters is a couple of things. Number one, more souls coming to Christ. Right? So every new family represents a life that God is reaching through your ministry. Number two, greater opportunities for spiritual growth. Right? A healthy, growing church can disciple more people, develop more leaders, and raise up more stronger believers. And then number three, bigger kingdom impact. Right? So when your church grows, your reach grows. More families restored, more marriages strengthened, more kids discipled, more needs met. Now, one of the questions that I always think to myself is, well, what's keeping people from growing? And I kind of put this quick list together. Sometimes people are struggling to grow. They find themselves stuck because there's no real clarity. There's no finish line. Ministry leaders are just doing whatever they think is best versus, hey, this is one direction we're heading. Another reason is guests visit, but they don't return. Maybe weak evangelistic culture. So we're doing some outreaches, and I've heard this many times. Hey, we did this amazing outreach, but then no one came back to the church. There's no leadership pipeline, right? People are coming, they're joining, but there's no way to disciple and to grow. And so because we're not developing leaders, all of the work kind of relies on a small few. There's no systematic discipleship process. It's almost like, hey, I joined the church and now I got to figure out how to grow on my own. There's no week to week ministry rhythm. And we're kind of operating under a what I call a man-made vision versus a God-inspired vision, right? God speaking to us and saying, no, no, this is the purpose behind your church. And so real quick in the chat, just kind of let me know which one you kind of resonate with the most. Number one, number two, number three, number four, number five. Just put the number in there. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just put one, two, three, four, five. Uh, both Pastor Travis and Pastor Adolfo, no leadership pipeline. Also, kind of like a week to week ministry rhythm. Awesome. Pastor Eden's put 4 and 5, no discipleship, no leadership. So when I look at all of these, what I kind of find the biggest reason that I have found as I'm talking to pastors that they find themselves stuck is what we call the pastorless everything culture. This tends to be the number one thing. So all of the others become symptoms to this. So here's what I mean. For example, many of you have wrote no real leadership pipeline. But when you're the guy who's doing all of the ministry and all of the work, when do you have the time to actually create a leadership pipeline? Or when you're the one who's doing pretty much everything, when do you have the time to create a discipleship process? Right? How do you keep week to week ministry rhythm when you're just trying to make ends meet on a weekly basis? And I didn't really come onto this. This didn't really hit me until I had a conversation with Pastor Roof Rodriguez. This is a pastor from New Jersey. I was working with Pastor Roof on their follow-up system maybe about 12 years ago. And I walked them through the entire system. And I remember her response. She said, "This is amazing, Pastor, but I don't have the time to put this together. I'm too busy doing ministry." And it kind of hit me. I was like, wait, you're too busy doing ministry that you don't have the time to follow up with new people who are coming to your church. And that's when I realized that more than just follow up, what pastors need is help so that they aren't leading alone, so we can create teams and develop teams. And this kind of led me to this specific verse in Ephesians 4:12, where it says that the responsibility of the fivefold ministry, pastors, leaders, teachers, is to equip God's people to do his work and to build up the church, the body of Christ. And so when I read this, I remember walking away and thinking to myself, my number one responsibility isn't to do the ministry, but to equip people to do the ministry. Right? My number one responsibility isn't to do the ministry, but actually to equip people to do the ministry. And so this led me to this 5-step process that I'm going to walk you through today. And again, I'm not going to be able to go into every little single detail just because this is an extensive process, but I want to introduce you to some of these things so that way you have an overview. And so the 5-step process, number one is, we got to have an evangelistic culture. Number two, what we call attending to belonging, which is connecting guests. Discipling and developing is number three. Number four, organize for growth. Number five is stop doing ministry alone. And so I'm going to walk you through these. Now I'm going to do it in a different order. I'm going to do it in the order that we normally, when we're working with churches, this is the order that we begin with. And so step number one, we call it organize for growth. And this is where we work on creating clarity, alignment, and structure so everyone runs in the same direction. Right? I don't know if this has ever happened to you, where you find yourself in a position where you want to accomplish certain things, and it feels like your leaders are all over the place. And so you spend more time trying to get them aligned than you do actually doing the ministry. Right? You spend more time trying to get your leaders on the same page than you actually do on actually getting things done. And so, what does it mean to organize your church for growth? Right? It means to put structure around the vision. God has given your ministry a specific vision, right? There are things that He wants to accomplish through your church, but we've got to put systems and structure, stuff like clarifying roles, building systems so the ministry keeps moving even when you're not around, right? Ministry shouldn't be limited to your availability. You should be in a position where you can accomplish ministry even when you're not around. And the reason this matters is because clarity creates momentum. Okay, when everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, now we're running in the same direction. What confusion does is it creates burnout. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, you've done this to someone, but I remember moments where because the senior pastor that I was serving under at one point wasn't clear on the outcome, I would do some work, come back, bring it. He said, no, 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 that's not what I'm looking for. More work. Is this? Nope. More work. Nope. No. And then next thing you know, 2 to 3 weeks have gone by and I've worked, but I've not made any progress. Why? Because there was no real clarity around what we were trying to do. And so until everyone knows the direction in their role, growth will stall. Okay. And so what this produces is if there's no written vision, there's no goals, people come, but we're not making progress. We might have ministries, but they tend to run in silos, meaning no one is connecting with each other. Everyone does what they think is best. Pastors make all the decisions, right? Because it's just faster and it's easier versus trusting and empowering the leaders you might have. Volunteers are busy, but they're not aligned. We're not working together. Growth feels random. It's almost like we're hoping that growth happens versus no, we know it will happen because look at the process. And then we've kind of run into what we call survival mode. Like I'm doing the best I can to keep things going. And this typically lends to burnout. In fact, I remember a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with a pastor, and he was in this position where he was going to he was going to go feed the homeless. This was on a Friday night. He was going to go feed the homeless on Saturday. He was then going to come home. I'm sorry, he was home preparing sandwiches because he was going to go feed the homeless on Saturday. After he prepared the sandwiches, he was going to go call all of his team members and make sure that they were there. Then Saturday morning, he was going to go feed the homeless, come back, have lunch with his family, and then finalize his sermon for Sunday. And just after listening to his schedule, I was like, man, you're like Superman. Like nothing gets done. You've got to do everything. And then I remember him just kind of pausing and he said to me, it's not that the church does too much, is that me and my wife are doing too much. And that's when it really hit me. I was like, man, you have what's called the pastor does everything culture, where you've got people who, because either A, they're not clear on what you want them to do, you find yourself in a position where they're spectating, they're watching you do the ministry, they're applauding you, but they're not participating with you. And the problem is that one is too insignificant of a number to accomplish anything of significance. That's John Maxwell. I remember hearing him say that. And so we started working on some of these things, for example, with Pastor Ryan. And my biggest goal when I was working with Pastor Ryan was I want us to get clear on where we want the ministry to go so that we can give responsibility over to pastors or to other leaders who can help you get there. And once they started to do that, the culture of the church quickly changed. And so here's what's involved in this. Number one is vision, right? You've got to have a vision, but let's just be clear. It's not your vision. The ministry vision, your church's vision is God's plan for your church. So when you think of a vision, I want you to think of this term. What does God want my ministry to accomplish? That's the vision. Number two, you got to have a strategy. Your strategy is simply answering the question, how are we going to get there? How are we going to go from where we currently are to where we believe God wants us to go? When I think of strategy, I always think of the Waze app on the phone. Those of you who might be using it, you put in you put in directions, you put in an address, a destination, quote unquote, a vision, and then what do you get? You get directions to help you go from where you are to where you believe you should be heading. And that's the same thing with your strategy, right? What are we doing, God? How are we going to accomplish this vision? Who do we need to reach? What ministry should we be doing? Show us, Lord, so that way we have a strategy, a plan for how we're going to accomplish God's purpose or the vision. Then we have structure. Structure is simply, God, you've given me these people. What do I need them to do? What position should they be in? And then your structure is really built to support systems. Systems being, what's the worship going to look like on Sunday? How are we collecting offerings? What are we doing on a regular basis to connect new guests? Right? What are we doing on a regular basis to disciple believers? Right? All of this are systems, things that we are repeating, we're doing over and over. Our outreaches are in essence systems, right? Every year, Easter's coming. Every year, Christmas is coming. Every year you have the summer. Every year you have, right, Mother's Day, or, depending on where you're located, maybe Thanksgiving. And so all of these are outreaches that are systematized. They come every single year. And so, one of the biggest things is writing an organizational chart, just getting clear on who's doing what. And so this was a chart that we created for Pastor Ryan at Harvest. And if you'll see, and I'm going to just annotate this a second, right? He's the senior pastor. This is the church's vision to transform Frazee and surrounding communities with the love and hope of Christ. And this was their strategy, how they were going to do it. Number one, they were going to teach people how to love God. They were going to help people identify purpose where God created them, and they were going to love on the community. Right? That's their strategy. Every single org chart, I always add in operations. Operations is simply, stuff like your budget. If you're hiring people, maybe their staff, but this is kind of like the backbones. Communication, like are you doing social media? Are you doing video? Like all of that stuff kind of comes out of your operations department. Okay. And so then we turn around and we just created an org chart, right? So if you see step number three, strategy number three, loving community, right? You see here it says loving community. That's part of their strategy. And then we put an org chart. These are all of the ministries that fall under the loving community. And so what do? We organize this. So everybody knows, hey, if you're part of the digital outreach, you're part of how we're going to love the community. If you're part of our release time, then you're going to be part of how we're going to love on the community. Okay. So what the organizational chart allows us to do is make sure everybody's clear on what's their purpose at the church. Like, what are they helping us do? Okay. And so here's a quick question for you guys. It's just a simple commitment. Can you take 10, 15 minutes? It doesn't even have to be pretty. Not right now, but maybe tomorrow, and create just an org chart. Just kind of map something out. Doesn't have to even be perfect. Just get some ideas on a piece of paper. Can you commit to that? Is that something that you can do? Just kind of let me know yes or no. And the reason I'm asking for this and I'm asking for a commitment is simply this. I don't want this to just be a whole bunch of nice information. You know, I want us to be in a position where we are, we have built the foundation we need to grow the church, right? And so, this is some of the things. Okay, awesome. Let me just get this for time. And so without structure, you get burnout. With alignment, you get momentum, right? When everybody knows where we're heading. Without clarity, you get confusion. But with systems, you get sustainability. Like we can do this long term. Okay. So we spent the last couple of minutes just talking about step number one, which is organizing for growth. Now here's the problem. Structure means nothing if it doesn't lead to connecting with people, right? And so that's going to lead us to step number two, connecting more guests. Okay, I'm just going to pause here 1 second and just give a quick caveat. If there's questions about anything I'm saying, just put it in the chat. I can see the chat and I'll answer the questions. And then at the very end of the presentation, I'll hang out and answer every question you guys have. But if you currently have a question about anything, just put it in the chat. And as I go through the steps, I'll make sure I answer any of the questions. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. And I see a couple of yeses, yes, yes, when it comes to creating an org chart. Don't make it complicated. Okay. Doesn't have to be perfect. Forget about making it with pretty colors and stuff like that. All you've got to do is make sure, am I clear on what I want people to do? Okay. And it might take you 15 minutes, it might take you an hour, but just take some time out to do this. And because here's the thing, you do it once, and then the rest of the time, you're just making some small adjustments. Okay. Step number two, connecting more guests. This is where we build systems that turn first-time visitors into lifelong members. Right? People are going to come to your church. It's very rare the pastor I've spoken to who says, I get zero first-time guests every single month. Most of the time, what I hear is, hey, I'll get one person here, two people there, but they don't stay. Right? So what we need is a connection process to get people to stay. And so quick question, how soon does your church follow up with first-time guests? Oops, and I didn't put the rest of the letters. A, same day. B, within 48 hours. C, within the week. Or D, we don't have a system. Awesome. Pastor Eden said within the week. Pastor Rodolfo, same day. Fantastic. Fantastic. So in the chat, you can just kind of put A for same day, B within 48 hours, C within a week, or D, we don't have a system. And it's okay not to have a system. Like, let's just, that's what we're here for. Awesome. So everybody's saying, for the most part, same day or at least within the week. Fantastic. Awesome. By the next day. Fantastic. Within 48 hours. Awesome. So connecting your connection system is an intentional process that moves people from attending to belonging, right? It creates care, clarity, consistency. It's really about helping people feel at home in your church. And this is the actual 5 steps that I teach. So if when I work with pastors and we're working on their system, it's literally step one, how do we welcome guests? Like how do people feel when they enter to your building? Because if they don't feel welcomed, forget following up, forget getting their emails, forget any of that other stuff. You want people to feel at home and they'll feel comfortable enough to give you their information. Step two is our follow up, right? What kind of emails and messaging we're going to send. Step three is what we call a meet and greet. And so some churches we work with do a monthly meet and greet. And that's where they invite all of the guests to kind of come back and meet the pastor, maybe over pizza. Some churches do a weekly meet and greet, like literally, hey, after the service, Pastor so and so is going to be sitting in the back. We've got some donuts, maybe some coffee. Go back there and we'll meet you. Then there's the membership class, right? The membership for me is all about this simple statement. How do we, joining the family. We want people to feel at home in our church. And then step number 5 is onboarding, meaning, hey, someone said they're going to join the ministry. What I find is many times people join a ministry, but they don't always stay in the ministry. And so the goal of onboarding is to get someone to join and stay long term in the ministry. Okay. See, the reason this matters is because 80% of your guests, they're going to decide if they're going to return within the first 7 minutes. So their experience, their decision on coming back, it has nothing to do with your preaching. It has everything to do with how they're treated by your volunteers, by the congregation, way before they hear you speak a sermon. Because every guest is a soul that's entrusted to our care. I would say this all the time. I'd say, man, every first time guest is a gift from the Lord to us. And so what we need to do is make sure that we have something in place to care for our guests. And so how I used to do this is I used to hope that our guests would come back. Literally, it'd be like, Lord, please send them back, have them come back a second time. We would do some random greet, like maybe we had somebody saying hello, other people at the front door, maybe some ushers were welcoming, others weren't. Sometimes we would collect cards, sometimes we would forget. And then we'd always say, oh, we'll see you Sunday, we'll see you Sunday. Versus the new way, which is how do we help people take next steps? Right? How it's not just hoping that they come back. It's how do we help them take next steps, growth steps? We have a trained hospitality team, right? So it's not just some greeters, some people are welcoming, others aren't. It's no. Our entire team is always welcoming to people. We're following up within 24 hours minimum, right? We want to have some sort of email, text message that goes out by that Monday. And it's not just see you next week. It's how can we connect with them during the week? How can we maybe grab a cup of coffee or with your follow-up, asking someone for a prayer request, sending them a link to a devotional or something that you can do to just help them with their spiritual growth, right? Because ultimately what we want is we want to see people grow in their relationship with the Lord. And so how do you apply this? Well, step number 1 is map what we call a guest journey. All that simply means is what are the steps that a guest is going to take from the moment he or she steps into your parking lot or steps into your building to the moment that they're about to exit? What are the opportunities for us to connect with them? Right? Is it maybe we have a first time guest table, making sure that the bathrooms are clean when they use the restroom, how we greet them in the services, like all of that stuff matters. And then we assign those things to people and then we check in. So we've got to just make sure we're asking, hey, is this happening? Is this happening? Because every single guest deserves the next step, you know. And I kind of want us to just really commit to this. Hey, I'm done with hoping. We're going to have a strategic process for connecting. right? We're going to be intentional about connecting our guests. This is Pastor Joe. Um, I've been working with Pastor Joe for about a year now. And the couple of things that we did initially when we first started working with him, number one is we retrained all of their ushers and greeters. I mean, they had sweet people, but it wasn't intentional. They weren't seeing it as these guests are coming to my house. And so now it's my responsibility to make sure I say hello, I welcome them, I take them to their seats, I help them feel connected. Then we started doing a meet and greet so that we can meet the guests because they wanted to meet the senior pastor. They wanted to meet whoever preached the sermon. They wanted to meet him. And so it was, how do we create some of these things to make sure we're connecting? And what happened was families stopped slipping away. And I knew families were slipping away because they had a list of about 400 or 500 first-time guests that came to the church for the first time but never returned. So people were coming to the church, but they weren't staying. And so once we put some of these steps, this process in, they started to see it. In fact, this Sunday they've got their next baptism, and they've got about 21 people that are going to be baptized this Sunday, which is amazing. It's fantastic. 21 lives, 21 families that are being impacted by the gospel. And so, very quickly, what's one follow-up step you can implement this week? Right? Maybe it's texting every guest within 48 hours. Maybe it's hosting a meet and greet. Maybe it's sending a handwritten note. Just kind of let me know in the chat, what can you commit to for in terms of following up this week? Awesome. Yep. Meet them the following week. Just, you know, quicker follow-up. Awesome. Awesome. I love the coffee meeting. There was a church in, I can't remember, somewhere in Australia. They were connected to a coffee shop. Um, and literally that was what they would give. They would give out a gift card for a free cup of coffee, and it was through a specific time frame when the pastor was actually doing a like a Bible study, kind of like a get together with guests at the coffee shop. And he did it like every single Thursday. And he was like, "Hey, meet me here, Thursday at this date at this time, and here's a cup of coffee, and I'd love to hang with you." Obviously, there's some follow-up, right? Because you want to make sure you're connecting with them. Um, but yeah, this was definitely one of the things, and I love that the coffee. Um, and then Pastor Mike wrote a host a meet and greet. I love meet and greets. I think one of the best things you could do is just take the time out to meet people. Just kind of let them get to know you and vice versa. Okay, awesome. So, because once you're connecting guests inside the church, you're ready to reach people outside. Right. So the reason we do this as step number two is because I want to make sure that every single person I'm connecting with, once we have a system to connect people, then I feel like, okay, now we can really focus on reaching the community because when they come to the church, I have a process in place to be able to connect them. Okay. And that leads us to step number three, building an evangelistic culture. Okay. And this is where our goal is to turn your congregation into your greatest outreach team. you know. And so, real quick question. When was the last time someone from your church personally invited a friend or a neighbor to a service? A, this week it happened. B, this month, or C, I can't remember. Awesome. Pastor Rodolfo wrote, this week. Fantastic. Awesome. This week. Great. Great. A few months ago. Awesome. All right. And so the idea behind this is that we want to make sure that our congregation sees the responsibility that they have, right? Second Corinthians refers to them as having the responsibility of the ministry of reconciliation. And so I want them to walk away understanding, man, you've got the ministry of reconciliation. And so, what's an evangelistic culture? Simply this, it's a church where mindset, it's a church-wide mindset where every member sees reaching others as part of their mission, right? It's not just the pastor's job, it's not just the responsibility of a few, it's my responsibility too. And the reason this matters is because, Pastor, you can't reach the city by yourself. I've been working with a church in the Philippines. I mentioned him earlier, Pastor David. His goal for this year is to reach 100. They're consistently hitting about 85. Um, they're consistently reaching about 85 people. And so I said to him, I said, hey, you've got about 15 you need to reach. You can try to reach that 15 by yourself, or you can blow past the 15 by getting your congregation to invite someone themselves, right? Because he's got a congregation of about 85, let's say about 40 of them are 100% bought in. If each person in the congregation, all 40 who were bought in, brought one person, forget 15 more people to hit 100. He'll be at 120, right? Why? Because I'm getting the congregation to be brought in. Pastor Mike wrote that you've got a 10-week outreach coming up. Awesome. So like you're consistently doing outreach for the next 10 weeks, right? Is that am I reading that correctly? That's what that means? All right, I'll let him, he'll catch up. So old way, pastor plans all the outreach, 2 to 3 big events a year. Maybe focus on visitors coming in and then hopefully bring people to church. The new way, members lead community impact, right? So if you're a member of the church, you have an opportunity at your job, at the gym, wherever you go to make an impact. What we call lifestyle evangelism, right? We focus not just necessarily on trying to get visitors to come in, but we focus on how can I get my members to go out? Because if I can get more members to go out, I know that they're going to bring in more people. And then be the church where the people are. So wherever you are, be make an impact. And so, again, what does this look like? Equipping your church, right? Teaching people how to share the story. Make it easy, make it simple. A lot of times, I think evangelism, you know, becomes this thing where we're so afraid to talk to people when make it natural, make it easy. Organizing strategic outreach, right? It could be quarterly events, monthly events, but the idea is that we want to be intentional about reaching the community. Here's one tip I'm going to tell you. I learned this a couple of years ago. We did an outreach in this community that we gave out turkeys for Thanksgiving, and this was like the first time we were there. The one of the guys from that community came to my cousin who was with us. He grew up in that neighborhood and said to him, "Hey, thanks for the turkeys, but where are you guys the rest of the year?" And what he was communicating to us was, "Hey, be consistent." And so find a block, find a community, find a neighborhood, and make it your business to reach them on a regular basis. Don't go all over the city, but find that one person, that one area that you can really make an impact on. And then once you reach them, then yeah, move on to another block, move on to another part of the city, but be consistent. Model lifestyle evangelism, right? Celebrate member testimonies and invite culture, right? Cast vision constantly. Keep reminding people that there are people who are dying in their sin, and that our responsibility is to reach them. And so, one of the things that we use for reaching this community is we do what we call a two-step outreach. And what that simply means is they do an outreach and then we give them a reason to come on Sunday. So this is Pastor Skirls, and he did an outreach where they did this painting. It was like a painting party they did for kids. They hosted it on a Saturday. It was jam-packed. They had a whole bunch of families that came with young kids. They painting party, and it was fantastic. But instead of giving everybody their painting, the work that the kids did, they held on to it and they said, "Hey, we're going to hang it up in our lobby on Sunday. And so we want you to come back. We want you to take pictures with it. We want you to kind of like see what we're doing." And then they came. So they had 20 first-time guests, families who came back that following Sunday. They were hanging out in the lobby, taking pictures with their kids' paintings and drawings because they made it look like it was a museum piece. And then, of course, they hung out for the services. Why? Because what we want to do is give people a reason to stay connected with us. Many times when we think of outreach, we think of a beginning and then it has an end. Instead, I want you to be thinking about your outreaches and steps. I'm going to reach you here, but I'm inviting you to something else. Right? I'm giving you a reason to connect. I have one other pastor friend, when he does his outreaches, he does a sports week. So for an entire week, they're doing sports camps and they're hanging with kids and families, and it's amazing. That following week, they do a dinner for those families. So all of those families that participated in the sports week come back that following Thursday. That Thursday, he gives them school supplies. He does stuff to help, the kids with their families or the families with their kids. And then they invite them to the church on Sunday. What is he doing? It's this idea of dating. So you know how if you're married, you didn't just go on one date and you got married. You built a relationship over time. That's part of what the outreach is going to do. If we're consistently reaching the same communities, we will be able to build relationship and rapport with them. It'll give us the right or the ability to speak into people's lives. Okay. And so they ended up having 20 first time guests. And so here's what I want us to do. From this day, I want you to commit to not doing outreach alone, right? So whenever there's going to be an outreach, man, we've got to get the team going. We've got to get volunteers going. They need to understand that, they're called, that every member is a missionary, that there's a purpose and plan for them. So quick recap, right? We talked about stop doing outreach alone, equip your members to reach others, create consistent opportunities, and then let's celebrate impact. One of my favorite things to do is when you do an outreach. So, for example, Pastor Mike talked about doing a 10-week outreach. Man, every single week, there's probably going to be some story to tell. When you on Sunday, you go back and you tell your congregation, man, this week we did X, Y, and Z. And look what happened. Brother so and so made a commitment to Christ, or this other person, we were able to feed them, or we were able to help them. Tell the story, stir stuff in the hearts of your congregation by letting them know what God is doing, how He's moving on behalf of the people. Okay, so step three, we want to create an evangelistic culture because growth brings responsibility. And here's the thing, growth brings responsibility. No pastor should carry it all by themselves, right? So that leads us to step number four, where I want to challenge you to stop doing ministry alone, right? And what that simply means is how do we identify and empower leaders so you're not carrying it all by yourself? Okay. So I'm going to go through steps 4 and 5 a little quicker just because we started a little late and it is getting, I want to try to keep us I was trying to keep us to about 2 o'clock. So I'm going to just speed this up just a touch. So what does stop doing ministry alone simply means? It means shifting from doing ministry for people to developing people for ministry, right? So I don't want you doing every single ministry. I don't want you doing every hospital visit. I don't want you doing every single wedding, funeral. I want you to develop a team. You shouldn't be doing every counseling appointment. You should be able to develop people to do works of service, right? Ephesians 4:12. And so the reason this matters is when everything depends on you, growth stops or growth is limited to your availability. You can't scale exhaustion. Okay, you can't grow if you're exhausted. And I started doing ministry in the youth ministry, and I can't tell you the amount of PKs, pastors' kids, who were angry at God because the church robbed them of their parents. But that happens when there's no balance. And so delegation isn't losing control, it's gaining capacity, being able to do more. And so the old way, right? The pastor does everything. The new way, the pastor develops others. The old way, leadership equals position, right? I have a title, where the new way is leadership equals participation. You may not be a pastor, but man, you can help us do some ministry. The old way, volunteers help, right? They kind of come alongside and they support you. The new way, volunteers own the ministry. Old way, there's no structure. And so we're just kind of randomly doing stuff. The new way, there's systems. And so it leads to multiplication. The old way is faster if I do it. And the new way, it's better if we do it. One of the questions that I challenge myself and I challenge other pastors with is whenever something difficult comes up, instead of asking the question, how can I get this done? The question needs to be, who do I know that can help me do this? And so we talked about this earlier, the Superman, what kind of call it the Superman syndrome, right? When the pastor does all of the work, right? And so what we want to do is we want to get into a position where it's not just one of us, but it's a group of people. So your job as a pastor isn't to do all of the ministry. Your job as a pastor is to spark stuff in your congregation and then give them the opportunity plus the boundaries to do the ministry. And so, a couple of things, right? When it comes to getting people to do ministry with you, number one is you want to begin by identifying leaders. And so, we use what we call the four C's: character, competence, chemistry, and commitment. Does this person have character where no one's watching? Do they love the Lord? Competence, can they grow as a leader? Right? Chemistry, they get along with other people. And then commitment, are they there, when no one is watching? Are they there early? Do they stay late? Or do I need to constantly be telling them, hey, I need you, I need you, I need you, right? I used to tell this to, I had one specific leader, I would say this to him all the time. I say, hey, my job is not to motivate you. My job is to tell you to slow down. If you're going too slow, you might be the wrong leader. If you're going too fast, I'm going to tell you slow down just to make sure we can keep up with you. But I'm looking for people who are passionate and excited about the ministry, not people who I need to always be lighting a passion under. Right. And so this is why I'm looking at these four C's. That's how I evaluate potential leaders. Invite them to the table, right? What's the vision? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And then give them room, equip them. And this is so important, some people are excited about the ministry, but they don't have the skill sets. So train them, give them what they need, and then empower them, right? Trust them to lead, let them make decisions, let them learn. And if they fail or they mess up, you come back and you correct them. It's not the end of the world. And so we use what we call the four C's, and this is a picture of what we call a leadership interest meeting. So this was for a church in Brooklyn. They had me come in and I did a leadership, kind of like a what we call a leadership interest meeting, where we talk about the vision, we talk a bit about the purpose and the direction, and then we give them opportunities where, hey, these are all of the ministries that are available. Which ones can you help us lead in? And so these were people who were taking on different roles in the ministry. They were coming to the church, but they weren't serving, and they were invited by invitation only. Like, it wasn't just open to everyone. It was, no, we have a specific role we have in mind for you. And then we kind of share, and then we ask them. And so I think the number was about 20 so far had taken on roles. This was maybe about a month ago that we did this. And so here's the question I want you to commit to. Who are you going to equip? All right. I want you to stop doing ministry alone, and I want you to commit to equipping one person. What does that look like? Whenever you're at church, or as many times as possible, when you're at church, they should be there with you. If you're there on Sunday, they should be helping you. If you're serving in any capacity. I remember when I used to run cables, when I was overseeing our production team, I hated running cables. Right, this was back in the days when I think it was as video was the name of the cable. I had one pin, and the pin would break all the time. So you just ran 50 feet of cable, the pin would break, and now I had to take all of those 50 feet out and put another 50-foot cable in. I hated doing that until I found a couple of young people who were like, I love doing this. And all of a sudden I said, you know what? I'm not doing this alone ever again. And I'd bring in volunteers, get some pizza, hang out. But guess what? It gave me an opportunity to disciple, an opportunity to have conversation, to check in. We talked about Pastor Ryan, and here's the thing about not doing ministry alone. Pastor Ryan, he went from it being him and two part-timers to it being him and five. He called it an executive team. This wasn't when we use the term executive team, these were people who were still volunteers, but they were taking on different roles. And so instead of him planning all of the outreaches, he had this individual, and her and her husband were running the outreach team. And so whenever they were doing an outreach, they did all of the planning. They did everything. He would show up, he'd come and he'd show up, he'd be there, but he didn't plan all the details. He didn't recruit all the volunteers. That was the responsibility of these volunteers. They again, I use the term executive team, but I want to be clear. This was not paid positions. These were volunteers. And then they would recruit these volunteers who were leading the ministries would recruit people who were helping them actually do the ministry work. And I remember he did around Christmas time, he did a volunteer celebration. Again, when I started working with him, he had 60 people. When they did that volunteer celebration, they had over 80 volunteers show up to it. 80 volunteers. Why? Because it was a switch in the thinking versus I'm doing it all by myself to no, I need a team of people to help me do this. And you're probably familiar with this, but this is the Moses Jethro conversation, right? When this is in I always say Deuteronomy. This is in Exodus 18. And, Moses is getting ready to consult all the people. And Jethro says, hey, what you're doing is not good. Tells them, choose capable leaders, teach them and share the load, right? Fast forward to Act 6. This is when the Grecian widows, they make their request, and the apostles are like, no, we can't do all of this. And what do? They select men who are full of the spirit and wisdom, and they give them that responsibility. But if you look at verse 7, it says, so the believers grew rapidly. In other words, because the disciples made a decision to involve other people and not just do all the ministry themselves, the byproduct was that there were more people involved, and it says the disciples grew rapidly. The church grew rapidly. More people were being impacted. Why? Because there were more people being involved. People stopped spectating and they started serving. And so, quick recap: you can't grow what you won't release. Right? If you're holding on to it, eventually, you're going to be in a point where you suffocate it. You want to equip leaders to carry the mission. You want systems that sustain what's started by the structure, right? So you organize, you put people in position, but then you want to make sure that they're serving and that they're doing the right thing. And shared leadership equals sustainable growth. Okay. So last thing, right? So because leaders who don't grow eventually go, so if they're not growing, eventually leaders will feel apathetic, they're not as engaged, and your church needs a pathway for long-term spiritual development. That leads us to step number 5 that we call develop people through discipleship. And how I want you to think of this is we want to turn members into mature believers and mature believers into high capacity leaders. Okay, so we want to turn members into believers, into mature believers, into disciples, and then mature believers into high capacity leaders. And so what does develop people through discipleship mean? It means that we're going to help people take intentional next steps towards spiritual maturity, right? And we're going to turn members into disciples and disciples into leaders. That's what we want to put in place. So if someone comes to our church over time, they should go from just I'm coming here on Sunday to, man, I'm leading in some capacity. All right. And the church doesn't rise by attendance, it rises by maturity. So when we talk about breaking 200, I just want to make sure this is really, really clear. Breaking 200 doesn't mean you're just going to grow the church in attendance on Sunday. It means that you've got to have a process for turning people who are attending the church to becoming members or being connected, and your members becoming mature disciples, and your disciples becoming your leaders, people who you can rely on, who will help you carry the weight of the ministry. Spiritual depth sustains numerical growth, right? As people are growing in their maturity, it's going to help us to be able to serve more people. You're going to have more teachers. You're going to have more people to help you disciple, right? All of that is part of the overall process. Okay. And this is one of the biggest mistakes we make. We mistake attendance for spiritual growth, right? Just because someone shows up doesn't mean that they're mature. And so here's what it looks like, right? Number one is I want you to define stages. Like someone's new, then they start belonging, then they start growing, then they start leading. Whatever the stages are. And if you notice there are these arrows, right? This arrow here, here, here. These arrows should really be symbolic of your classes or your systems. So for example, if someone is new, maybe it's my membership class that helps them belong. And if someone's belonging, then maybe I have a basic leadership class that helps them, or a discipleship class that helps them to grow. And then if they're growing in Christ, then I have a leadership class that's going to help them become leaders. So you see how the arrows in between become the process that's going to take someone from where they are to where I want them to be, where that next step is. So all of these arrows for me represent an actual class or represent some sort of next step we want them to take. And I want you to create intentional environments, small groups, classes, mentorships. And here's what I want you to be thinking, guys. Um, Today, you might be in a small group. Tomorrow, I want you leading a small group. Right? So every single person has a next step. So if today you're leading a group, fantastic, love it. Tomorrow, I want you to I'm sorry, if today you're taking a small group, tomorrow I want you to be leading one because everyone should be growing in some capacity. Provide coaching, right? Um, help people apply what they're learning. So it's not enough that someone sits in a classroom, but what are they doing with it? Okay. And then again, we've got a pipeline. We created a pipeline, and again, as I mentioned earlier, in a couple minutes, I'll share with you what the program looks like. But in that program, we teach you our pipeline, and we called it altar to elder. And the idea simply is, one day someone responds to an altar call, and over time, we want them to receive the understanding, the skills that they need to become an elder, someone who I can entrust people with over time, not overnight, over time. How do you apply this in your church? Number one, you've got to define your discipleship pathway, right? Like, how do I take a new believer and go to the next steps? How do I take a new believer and help them to grow? How do I take a new believer, turn them into a, you know, mature believer over time? What does that look like? Assign a leader to each stage. Why? Because you want to make sure anything that doesn't have someone accountable for it is just words on the paper. Okay, I want you to get that. Like just because you mapped out this a beautiful system, unless someone is responsible for it, it's just words on the paper. And eventually the paper gets stuck in some drawer and you forget about it and you never touch it. So if you want something to be implemented, assign it to someone. Okay. Step three, create milestones and celebrate. Right. So if someone goes from, hey, I just started coming to the church to now I'm a member of the church, celebrate that. Right. If someone goes to your leadership class, celebrate that. Um, Make sure that you are acknowledging because we go so fast from one thing to the next. Sunday comes every 7 days. You've got to take a moment and celebrate the milestones, celebrate the progress, celebrate the things that you're able to see that God is doing in the hearts of people. And then track engagement, right? Make sure people are taking next steps, that they're moving forward. And so here's kind of like the commitment. I'm going to help every believer take their next step. Every single person in your church has a next step. Okay. Um, this is I didn't include his picture, but Pastor Jacob Crawford, he started this was actually really phenomenal. They started a art school. They used the word art, they used the word school. It really wasn't a school. It was just, they got some kids together, they taught them some dance moves, they taught them to sing some songs. But because they were interacting with people, they were interacting with these kids, the leaders had an opportunity to influence the kids. And so, yes, they were using dance, and yes, they were doing singing songs, and it was fun for the kids, but it was also opportunities for them to invest in the kids. But then here's what they started to do. Every single Sunday, once a month, they would feature the kids. So maybe they had a dance, that the kids were working on. They'd show it on a Sunday. And guess who would come out to see them? Mom, dad, grandma, uncle, aunts. And guess what happened to the ministry? It grew rapidly. Within a year, they added over 100 people. Why? Because they were investing in kids and then they were showcasing or celebrating what God was doing in those kids on Sundays. And who came to celebrate those kids? Mom, dad, uncle, aunts. Everyone came along. And so, really quick, I just want to recap. Discipleship fuels sustainable growth, right? Clarity creates consistency. Depth, maturity, it produces durability. Your church is going to last when you've got mature people coming alongside. And your best leaders are your best disciples. Okay. All right. So, really quick, just to recap, we talked about the system. right? And I kind of mentioned throughout, I mentioned a couple of steps. I just said, hey, starting from step number one, we talked about organizing for growth, the need to make sure that we have some structure and systems in place. We talked about connecting more guests, right? Making sure that we're able to turn new believers into first-time guests into mature or into members of the church. We talked about building a evangelism culture where, yeah, we're going to do some outreaches, but we're also going to make sure that our leaders are helping us to reach people. Our congregation is helping us to reach people. We talked about not doing ministry alone, where we were going to become intentional about identifying and empowering leaders. And then we talked about developing people through discipleship, making sure that we are not just uh, putting people in ministry, but that we have a process in place to equip them and to help them grow. And so here's the question. Now that you've seen it all, what are you going to do with it? Right? Now that I've kind of walked you through this process, what are going to be some of your next steps? Right? Because what I want you to commit to is saying, man, I'm going to do something, right? I'm gonna do something. I'm not just gonna sit here and, just kind of I'm not just going to be here saying, "Hey, I just watched something," but I want you to do something with this. I mean, like I'm glad you were part of the class, but I want you to do something with it. And so you've got three options at this point. Number one, you can walk away once we're done and you're inspired, but do nothing with it. All right. And unfortunately, that's what I kind of find happens is, hey, this was a great class. But I'm not, that was all it was. Number two, you can try to figure it out on your own. Absolutely. You can go ahead and I think we've shared enough for you to actually put some things together that you can really take some next steps. And then option number three is you can let us come alongside and help you. Um, and so I just want to just make sure it's okay. Would it be okay if I shared with you how we're going to help pastors just like you build this system in about 6 weeks? If that's okay, just kind of give me a yes in the chat. If not, it's absolutely fine. I'm fine either way. But I just want to make sure that if you're okay with it, I'll go ahead and just kind of share. Awesome. Yep, I got a couple of sures and yeses. Fantastic. So I'm just going to go ahead, take about another 5 minutes and just let you know how we're going to go about this. So I want to introduce you to the Breaking 200 6-week accelerator. I mentioned it already earlier. And our goal is to build a healthy church that grows without leading alone. You're going to get 5 training modules, right? One for each step of the system that we just walked through. It's going to include 6 weeks of live implementation. But these are what I call labs. And so literally we will jump on a group call and the group call, I'll do a short synopsis, but really the goal is how do you apply this? What does this look like? How are you building this into your system? And so you'll get support. You'll also get the implementation. There's templates, scripts. I've got some AI stuff that I will give to you to make it super easy. You'll get personalized feedback, weekly coaching. You'll be able to build your volunteer and leadership engine in real time. So we're going to help you build these things. And then one of the bonuses I just want to highlight is a giving campaign. The reason that I'm doing this as a bonus is because I know that one of the questions that as a pastor you're going to have to answer is, well, how do I invest in this thing? And so I want it to be as easy as possible for you to say yes, because we have a giving campaign that we're going to help you implement to see an increase in giving to cover the cost. Okay. And so in 6 weeks, we're going to be doing the following, right? We're going to install your 5-step church growth system. We're going to help clarify your vision, structure, org chart, create a ministry playbook that you can now share with all of your team, your leaders, so we're all running in the same direction. We're going to turn guests into engaged members with the full connection system. I showed you the 5 steps. You're going to use my AI wizards to write your follow-up emails, texts, video scripts. What's fantastic is when I used to write these things on my own, it would take me I want to say about 3 or 4 days of focused time. Now it gets done in less than 20 minutes with the AI wizard, which is fantastic. I love easy. Um, I want to, it's going to help you launch your outreach plan, mobilize your church, right? Like ultimately, we want to make sure that we're reaching more people. you'll be able to build your leadership team, recruit new volunteers using our volunteer interest meeting, which we talked about a moment ago, create a discipleship and leadership pathway. And my favorite part about this is I'm going to teach you some stuff, but then you're going to take it and I'm going to help you massage it so it fits your culture. Like this is not one of those things where it's like, hey, this is how you got to do it, and that's it. It's more of like, hey, this is the guiding principles, and then you figure out, we will figure out how to implement this. Um, it's going to lead to no more leading alone, no more volunteers quitting, no more guests slipping through the cracks, no more growth barriers. Finally, systems at scale, um, and a team that helps support you so you're not doing this all on your own. Um, and so, again, as I mentioned earlier, you'll have 12 months access to this. So the training modules, then live, we're going to do 6 weeks of live, done for you plug and play, personalized feedback, though you volunteered, launch giving, all of it for one payment of 149. Or if you want to pay monthly, it's 27 bucks a month, right? The reason we did it, one, is this is kind of like our Black Friday prices. And I wanted a number two with just, I know all of the challenges that people in churches are facing, especially in this season, financially. We wanted to make it as accessible as possible. I didn't want cost to be the thing that keeps you from seeing growth in your ministry. These are simple guarantees, 2 steps. Number one, in the first 30 days, if you say, hey, I'm going through this, but this is not for me, cool. You say that, and then we'll just refund you, no questions asked. After 30 days, our second guarantee is that if you go through this process and there's no real impact and you're sitting back and saying, man, we didn't really see any kind of change, then I'll work with you one-on-one. We'll jump on some weekly calls until we get to the point where we're seeing the impact that we should be seeing. Okay. And so, a couple of bonuses. Number one is you're going to have access to our program that we call Church Growth Academy. You'll have 12 months access to this. What does this program include? Every single week, we do a masterclass. So after the 6 weeks of the labs where we're helping you build this, you're going to have ongoing support for the rest of the year, right? We have live master classes. You'll have access to all of the training, the libraries, all of it. It's 12 months access. You'll have access to our onboarding system. So what we're going to do as a bonus is we'll set up an evening session where you can bring your ministry leaders on, and we're going to train them on how to do onboarding. What does onboarding mean? What it means is whenever a new person wants to join your ministry, we're going to walk you through what the steps you should be taking to make sure that when they join the ministry, they stay in the ministry long term. Okay. And these are some of the steps, right? Orientation call, first or Sunday, grace period, evaluation. We've got all of this stuff laid out, and we're going to make it available for your teams so that someone joins the ministry, they'll stay in the ministry. On top of that, our third bonus is Facebook Ads Masterclass. Many churches are running ads, and so we're going to give you our actual sessions that you can walk through. Literally, it's like step one, do this, step two, do that, step three. We mentioned our follow-up AI. You'll have access to that. And these are resources, again, you've heard me talk about some of these pastors, Pastor Troy, Pastor Ryan, Pastor Jacob. They've been utilizing these resources and really seeing growth and impact. And so, as I mentioned, 12 months, 149, one payment, or $27 a month. And if you sign up today, this is our sign up today. It's the 4-week year-end giving campaign that I mentioned to you earlier. This is a campaign that Pastor Ruth used. Her church is a church of 60. They used it a couple of years ago to add over $10,000 within 4 weeks. So it's a 4-week campaign. So you can use it to end the year, do end of year offering, or you can use it to launch the year. But the idea is that, this is the opportunity for you to leverage this to be able to reach more people. And so that's it. 149, $27. I'm going to put this in the chat. Right, you can join us, and if you join us today, again, if you join us today, it will include the 4-week year-end giving campaign. Okay, so I've put it in the chat. You are more than welcome to join us. It would be an honor and a privilege to be able to walk you through these systems. So let me just stop here. If you have questions I want you to feel free to unmute yourself. It's just us pastors here. Unmute yourself. You can ask questions. And then once the questions are done, I'll also drop in. In fact, I'm going to just give me 1 second. I'm going to drop the link in for that resource document I mentioned. So in the chat, I've also dropped a document. It has a couple of resources, um, so that way you can download and walk through some of the things that we talked about today. Okay. Um, and just remember, the bonus is for today only, the giving bonus. So if you sign up today, we'll add you to that session once we do it.